Will hear and answer the prayer we have just sung. Let me invite you to open the Word of God with me to Mark chapter 14, verses 1 through 11 of Mark chapter 14. And as you turn, let me give you 3 hooks on which we might hang our thoughts this morning as we hear this text again. Perverse enmity, perverse betrayal, and praiseworthy adoration. The perverse enmity toward Jesus on the part of the religious leaders of his day, the perverse betrayal of Jesus by Judas, one of his trusted disciples, and sandwiched in the middle of that story of perversity in this, the darkest week of Jesus' life, this bright story of the praiseworthy adoration of an unnamed woman for Jesus. Verse 1 of Mark 14. Now the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread were only 2 days away, and the chief priests and teachers of the law were looking for some sly way to arrest Jesus and kill him. But not during the feast, they said, or the people may riot. I say that the enmity of the religious leaders is perverse because they should have known better. However difficult they may have found to accept this rabbi from Galilee, they should have seen that the hand of God was upon him. They should have recognized that the Spirit of God was empowering him to do mighty deeds. And they should have realized that his popularity among the common people was well-deserved because he was a man of integrity, compassion, faithfulness, love, mercy. They should have known better, but they wanted to kill him. Why? Well, probably a mix of reasons. They found his teaching difficult to accept, but that was hardly a capital offense. Israel's teachers disagreed with each other about a great many things, some of them important, and they often disagreed vociferously, but they weren't trying to kill each other. Some of the leaders may have found that words Jesus spoke about himself bordered on blasphemy, which would be a capital offense under Mosaic law if the charges could be established in a fair public trial, and of course, if what Jesus said about himself was not true. Undoubtedly, some of the leaders feared that some of Jesus' more enthusiastic followers might spark some kind of armed uprising against Rome. That his leaders, believing him to be the Messiah and thinking that the Messiah was going to be a political and military deliverer, would go ahead of Jesus and riot and take up arms against Rome, which the occupying empire would crush mercilessly. Probably a mix of reasons why they wanted to kill him. But unless I'm forgetting something, there's just one place in the Bible where their motives are explicitly labeled. And that's in the next chapter of Mark, in the scene where, on trial before Governor Pilate, the governor understands, discerns that the leaders handed Jesus over to him out of envy. Envy. They envied his power. They envied his success. They envied his popularity. Envy, a powerful and perverse motivation. They want to kill him. But not yet. Not during the feast, or there might be a riot. During Passover, Jerusalem was packed with pilgrims. And many of those pilgrims came from Galilee, where Jesus was well liked. And so as much as the leaders want to do away with this pest, they don't want to take action now when there might be an uprising on the part of those who love and admire and believe in Jesus. No, they're willing to bide their time. Well, one of the ironies of this story is that Jesus knows he will die during Passover. Jesus wants to die during Passover. It is his Father's will that Jesus, the Lamb slain before the foundation of the world, will go to the cross for you and for me during Passover. The leaders see themselves as the people with their hands on the levers of power, but Jesus knows, and we the reader know, that there is a sovereign God orchestrating the events of Passion Week. They want to get rid of a nuisance. Jesus wants to offer his life a ransom for many. Well, something happens to change their mind. Something happens to change their timetable. This perverse story continues in verse 10, where Judas, one of the 12, went to the chief priests to betray Jesus to them. They were delighted to hear this. You bet they were. And promised to give him money. So he watched for an opportunity to hand Jesus over. The unexpected, unlooked for chance. One of Jesus' intimate followers will help them. Now they'll be able to arrest Jesus at night outside Jerusalem. They'll be able to hold a night trial where the outcome is predetermined, and they trust that Governor Pilate will ratify their death sentence, and if all goes well, they can have Jesus dead before many in Jerusalem have even gotten up on Friday morning. Why did Judas do this? That's a question that anyone who wants to dramatize the Jesus story is going to have to wrestle with. What sense can we make of Judas and his motives? In staging the Zion Passion play, for example, we didn't dress the actor playing Judas like Count Dracula. Obviously a bad guy from the first time he walks on stage. No, even the other 11 apostles apparently did not suspect Judas of being a despicable traitor. What made him tick? What made him betray his master? And again, there might have been a mix of reasons. It's possible that Judas had somehow come to agree with the religious leaders that Jesus was a dangerous heretic. It could be, and this is a very common explanation, that Judas had become disillusioned, that he signed on to follow Jesus thinking that his master was going to use his miracle-working power to lead an army into victory over Rome and raise Israel up to its position of former prominence in the world. And when it became obvious that that was not Jesus' program, Judas is disillusioned and decides, the way things are going, I better have some friends in high places. That's possible. A more positive spin is that Judas was trying to force Jesus' hand. That he thought his master was being a little too slow in instituting this military and political program. But if Judas could get the authorities to crack down on Jesus during Passover, well, then maybe that would force Jesus' hand to do something now. Well, again, I may be forgetting something someplace else in the Bible, but I can only think of one place where Judas's motives are explicitly labeled. And that's in the Gospel of John, where we're told that Judas was a thief. He'd been helping himself to the treasury of the disciples. Now he sees an opportunity to make some money. He's a greedy, money-loving villain. Perverse betrayal. And in the middle of this story of perverse enmity and perverse betrayal, this dark tale, Mark sandwiches this gem of a story about praiseworthy adoration. While, verse 3, he was in Bethany, reclining at the table in the home of a man known as Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. My friend Abe Karuvula has written a fine commentary on Mark, and when he comes to this verse, he describes the woman's gesture as precious, pure. What is the third P he uses? Profuse. Precious, pure, and profuse, and therefore praiseworthy. It was precious. Nard, sometimes called spikenard, was a very expensive perfumed oil imported from India and often, appropriately, kept in a very expensive alabaster jar. We're told in a few lines from now that this gift was worth a year's wages, literally 300 denarii. A denarius was 1 day's wage for a laboring person. In the account of the feeding of the 5,000, the disciples say it would take 200 denarii to feed a crowd like this. So this is a huge, expensive gift that she pours out, precious. And it's pure nard, not mixed with anything else, not watered down. And therefore, there may be another irony here, although Mark isn't explicit about it. She gives a gift to Jesus that's worth 300 coins, and how much did Judas get for betraying Jesus? 30. Mark doesn't mention it, but his first readers would have known the story. And maybe this is an implied irony that shows how much Judas valued Jesus and how much this woman values Jesus. 300 denarii worth of pure and precious nard. And it was profuse. She didn't just break a seal and pour out an ounce or so of oil on Jesus, as you might as a courtesy to a dignity, a guest in the town. She breaks the jar and gives her all. The gesture is precious, pure, profuse, and therefore praiseworthy. But not everybody there thought it was praiseworthy. Some, verse 4, some of those present were saying indignantly to one another, "Why this waste? Waste. Waste. Why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor." And they rebuked her harshly. And then, don't you love Jesus? He comes to her defense. "Leave her alone," verse 6. "Why are you bothering her? She's done a beautiful thing to me." Beautiful. Why do you think Mark inserts this story into the middle of the dark story? I have a hunch it's for the same reason that a jeweler will lay a beautiful diamond on a piece of black felt, to make the beauty stand out even more. Right in the midst of all of this ugliness, all of this heartache, all of this darkness and evil and perversity is this beautiful thing. The poor you will always have with you, verse 7, and you can help them anytime you want. but you will not always have me. Now, Jesus does not deny that mercy ministry to the poor is a high priority, very important for God's people. It was for centuries. He's just saying that there are other things that are important too. And you won't always have me available right here to do something beautiful for. Now, Mark doesn't tell us things about this woman that we might like to know. He doesn't tell us her name. He doesn't tell us how she knew Jesus, what her former interaction with the Master may have been. Mark doesn't tell us whether she was an invited guest at this occasion or whether she heard that Jesus was going to be there and showed up so that she could do this beautiful thing for him. Mark doesn't tell us whether she was a rich woman or a poor woman. If she was rich, even so, this was a marvelous, generous gesture. If she was poor, this gift may have represented her life savings or her inheritance from her father. We don't know. We don't even know for sure why she did it. Jesus says in the next verse, "She did what she could. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial." It's possible that that was her conscious intention, that she saw where things were headed, figured Jesus is going to be crucified as a criminal, and he'll be thrown in a common grave and be denied the ordinary courtesies that loved ones show toward the body of one they've lost. And she says, I'm going to do what I won't be able to do in a few days. I'm going to do it now. It's possible. It's also possible that this gesture, which was typical of what you might do for a king, was meant by her as a confession. He's my Lord. He's my master. He is my Messiah. And that Jesus says, God bless her, this woman has done something even more beautiful, even more significant than she knows. She's gotten my body ready for burial. Either way, he goes on to say in verse 9, I'll tell you the truth, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. Do you know this is the only place in the Gospels where Jesus is so effusive in his praise of what somebody has done? There are other things that people do for him, but he nowhere else says, I'm telling you the truth, this is going to be remembered throughout the world whenever the gospel is preached. And sure enough, from Antioch to Argentina, from Wisconsin to Warsaw, from Zion to Zululand, wherever the gospel's been preached, wherever Mark's gospel has gone, this woman is remembered and honored. And we do that this morning. We remember her and honor her. But I wonder if we're supposed to do something more than remember her and honor her. I wonder if there's some application that the Holy Spirit intends that we get from this story. Some take home, some way we should be different other than just admiring this woman for her beautiful, praiseworthy adoration. Well, some readers have discerned a principle in this text, a principle that sometimes beauty trumps practicality. That is, the world is full of need, crying, aching need. But that doesn't mean that we should never expend energy or money on doing something beautiful for God. Give you an example. Some years ago, a megachurch in Southern California built a magnificent, beautiful, multi-million-dollar worship space, and a Christian magazine editorialized, that money could have fed sub-Saharan orphans by the hundreds. I don't pretend to know what the will of God was in that situation, how he would have preferred that money to be spent, but I can imagine the board of that church having a discussion about whether they should proceed with this expensive project, and somebody saying, "You remember what we read in Mark 14? Honestly, I think, men, our motives are pure. We're not proposing this to glorify ourselves. We want to do something beautiful for God, something that will last for a long, long time. And of course, we will minister to the poor in our community and overseas. But I think we should proceed with this project." As somebody has put it, the beauty of generosity cannot be measured by the yardstick of utility. And I think that's true. I think that that principle is true. I doubt that that's mainly what Mark was trying to teach. Another possibility, and some interpreters have noticed this, how Jesus values women. And Jesus does value women. Christian men did not need or should not have needed modern feminism to teach them to value women. We have our Bibles. We have the example of Jesus, who included women among his close followers, who, even in his preaching, used sermon illustrations that women could relate to. He didn't only talk about the bears and the packers. He used domestic examples that women would relate to. And here, in a scene dominated by men, powerful men, grumpy, angry men who are criticizing her, Jesus stands up for her. So, a principle is that we should value women like Jesus did. And that's true. Though I doubt that that was the main reason Mark told the story. Maybe there's a command here. Sometimes the Bible does speak to us in terms of command. Thou shalt not, pray without ceasing, honor your father and your mother. There's all kinds of commands in the Bible, and we shouldn't apologize for them when we encounter them. We know the application. We're supposed to do what the text told us to do, or avoid doing what the text told us not to do. But I don't know that there's a command in this passage. Jesus doesn't take the disciples to task and say, "Hey, you guys really should have taken up a collection and bought some nard." And Mark doesn't even hint that we are supposed to take this as an obligation. In fact, I don't know that this kind of over-the-top, generous gesture of praiseworthy adoration is the kind of thing that you can legislate. It either comes from the heart spontaneously or it just doesn't come. Teachers of preaching sometimes warn students about Mother Teresa applications. Now, I know that Elmer Sorgal used Mother Teresa last week, but he didn't do this. What I mean is that a preacher will talk about Mother Teresa's selfless life of giving and living among the desperately poor of Calcutta, and then say, we should all be Mother Teresa. To which the response of a lot of people, even though they're not going to say it out loud in the church service, is, yeah, like that's going to happen. Me, be Mother Teresa. So I don't think there's a command here. And the principles that we can see here are not, I don't think, the main impact that the text is supposed to have. Let me tell you the impact that this text has had for me as I've meditated on it in recent weeks. It's left me with a question. How much love for Jesus is too much? Did this woman love Jesus? Too much? Is that even possible? So let me leave you with the question that I think God has left me with. How much love for Jesus is too much? What if you were to revisit your sacrificial offering and add to it enough that it was truly sacrificial? It meant that you were going to have to forfeit something that you really wanted, something that you were looking forward to. Would that be a waste? Or what if instead of, or in addition to, giving, you went as a missionary to some far-flung part of the globe, far from affluence, far from comfort, to give your life to Jesus' mission in the world? Would that be a waste? Or what if right here in the United States, you were willing to give up a potentially lucrative career to use your time and talents in a different field that you knew would enable you to contribute more directly to Jesus' cause in the world? Would that be a waste? What if, like a friend of mine, you committed yourself to a life of intentional celibacy? To go through life unmarried so that you could devote yourself to Jesus' cause in the world without the complications of family life. Would that be a waste? What if you were to do something so extravagant, so expensive, so outrageous, so over the top, that other people at the table, even everybody at the Lord's table, would just shake their heads? Would that be a waste? How much love for Jesus is too much? Just asking.